The back of Minister of Finance Tito Mboweni giving his presentation on the financial readjustments that will be made in order to secure South Africa both in a socio-economic perspective as well as for business. For a reaction now, we're joined by Busi, Sibeko, who's researcher at the Institute for Economic Justice, and we're also joined this afternoon by our business editor, Xolani, Mbanjwa. Mr. Sibeko, good to be with you this afternoon. Your reactions on the economic measures that the Minister of Finance has highlighted today, what's your take out?
Yeah, thank you for that, and thank you for having me here. I think certainly the 36+ billion that has been announced is something that we obviously welcome, particularly the extension of the SRG grant to March of 2022. Of course, these measures are less than what we have advocated for. We've actually estimated, a relief package of about 70 billion rand, and so the current measures that have been proposed are not sufficient, would argue. But of course, the proof will be in the pudding. It will be interesting to see how this new money, as the National Treasury has emphasized, will play out in the medium-term budget policy statement, given that the National Treasury has said time and time again that the fiscal framework remains. So it'll be interesting to see how these measures are laid out in the budget itself.
And where are the gaps? You said that you had projected a 70 billion rand need, and we're not very close to that. Where do you believe that the gaps are? And there's also another question, and Xolani, if you could weigh in on this as well. There's a question that was asked by one of the journalists saying that 50 billion rand is the calculated damage amount for eThekwini. Now, that's just eThekwini. Where does Gauteng actually factor in there? I don't know if you managed to get any of that, Xolani.
Yeah, I did, and Ismail Momoniat did say that they're in consultation with other departments to try and identify more of the affected businesses. And this is quite important to determine because KwaZulu-Natal and Gauteng account for 50% of the country's output, and that is huge. When it comes to what we put out as an economy, those two provinces are quite important. Look at the exports in the harbour down in Durban, how much they were impacted, and you can look at how much Gauteng was also impacted. So they said they're still counting the cost, and we're still going to hear from more organizations about what they are finding out, whether it's the South African Property Owners Association or the other retailers, about how much exactly did this cost the economy. Initially, we know how much the costs are, but definitely we're still counting the costs. As the minister says, there are multiplier effects that are impacted in the economy, which we are not going to see immediately.
And let me then throw this to you, Ms. Sibeko. In light of this background, the fact that the costs are still being counted, KwaZulu-Natal accounts for 50 billion rand of those damages estimated. The amount of the relief package right now is 36 billion rand. Where do you believe government will be able to source the other funding that has not yet even been quantified?
Yeah, and I think that's fundamentally the problem, right? The problem is understanding this crisis within a larger crisis, right? To understand that under lockdown level 4, that businesses were severely impacted, workers, households, and so forth, and to say that this current package sort of responds to the immediate crisis, which was, around the looting and so forth. But actually, we have to consider within the other crisis that we see in our country. I mean, in our package, one of the things that we advocate for is an expansion of the public employment stimulus, right? So that you can generate jobs and so forth. And so this package does not respond sufficiently to actually the needs of our economy as it currently stands when we think about the larger context in itself. And so these measures will not be adequate. And in fact, we would have argued that, we need to have more measures. We need more emergency relief measures that really target business, households, and workers. And so, of course, it's great that the tours and UI access being expanded. But like we've already argued to say, the 350 is not enough. Yes, it goes a long way, as the minister says, but actually it should at least be at the food poverty line level, to really respond to people's food basic needs, right? So, yeah, absolutely. I think I don't know how. Again, it's that question of, again, what will the MTBPS really show? Will they take into account when they know the total cost? Will they add more funding to respond to the crisis and the broader crisis in itself?
So let's listen in to DG Dondo Mohajane breaking down the details of this relief package.
We will, as Minister indicated, support the relief of social relief of distress, extend the support for 350. The intervention that the UIF is making in numbers is about 5.3 billion rand that will go towards this initiative. And it's important that we note also that the other key intervention that we are making, as Minister indicated, is defense, 700 million, and the police, 350 million. We will be providing SASRIA with a backdrop and support of about 3.9 billion immediately, and making sure, but we'll be watching very closely in ensuring that we support businesses that are there. There are some tax incentives, employment tax incentives that we're expanding, about 5 billion rand of releasing back to businesses in the form of supporting for their employment initiatives. So about 5 billion is made available for that particular. All in all, ladies and gentlemen, there's about 36 billion rand worth of support that we are putting on the table that we will be interacting with within the parliamentary system. Immediately, we will set certain processes in place for the Department of Social Development to access the 26.7 billion rand as part of this package that will make sure that we support business, small, vulnerable households, those who qualify, and we are in discussion in ensuring that that happens as soon as possible.
Now, Xolani, there was a point there where Minister Tito Mboweni was talking about the 350 Rand grant. And there was a subtext there because he kept on emphasizing the importance of work. He kept on emphasizing the need for creating work, even in this backdrop. And at some point, he also spoke about municipalities not necessarily being up to speed and not being able to provide services and a lot of things still needing repair. Talk to us a little bit about that and what that really means.
You know, for me, he did not want to actually get into this. It actually dragged, it was dragged out of him. What he actually means is he does not want to pay people 350 rands or any basic income grant without them doing any work, which is why at the beginning he mentioned, municipalities that need a lot of work in infrastructure and paving, and people need to work. So he didn't want to actually get into it, Tammy, and that's exactly, one of the things that struck me when he said, I don't want to get into trouble for this, but. If it's on the table, it's something that we need to discuss. It's happened in the past. The public works program, I forget the name of it now. EPWPs.
The Extended Public Works.
Yes, that has worked in some instances quite well, but not in other instances. Maybe that would be the model that he wants to talk about, because we do have a lot of people who are unemployed, but he should not be hiding behind anything.
Maybe the timing right now is not quite right.
Exactly.
That the country is distressed and maybe saying earn your keep. Yes. Is not really the type of lingo that you want to be
exactly
articulating right now.
Yeah.
I see you, Sibeko, nodding quite vigorously there as we speak. And this touches on a point that you made a bit earlier on about an employment stimulus package, which you believe is missing and should be the focus. Break that down for us.
Absolutely. I mean, it's very critical that we understand the role of grants and what grants they should do, and of course acknowledge that great need for jobs. I mean, I think that if they really believe that jobs are critical, they would have spent the 100 billion that was announced last year already as part of the 500 billion stimulus package or response package. They would have spent that 100 billion last year to create and protect jobs, which National Treasury did not. In fact, they only allocated a proportion of that 100 billion last year, and said they would spend the remainder of it in the medium term. So clearly, they've got the resources to stimulate the job creation that they're talking about. And in the absence of that commitment, the lack of commitment to actually allocating the funds necessary to create jobs, and to also then turn around and say, people must work for grants, I mean, to me, does not necessarily make sense. I mean, we've argued to say, you need to expand, again, like I said, the public employment stimulus, EPWP is critical. I mean, we can see that there's a lot of work that is needed in our country, right? It's not, and he spoke a lot about, education is important and so forth, but we have to think about, the demand side of labor. You can build the supply side of labor as much as you want, but there has to be a real demand for labor, which National Treasury has to step in and fill that post, right? But again, it's also that question of how...
Oh, Ms. Sibeko, unfortunately, we seem to be losing you there towards the end. But if we may, I know, Xolani, there's just one really burning question that you would like to ask before we close up.
Yes, Busi, I wanted, if you're back with us, I wanted to ask this question. The temporary employer relief scheme, we have spent as a country over 60 billion rands on it. Now that it has been extended, 5.3 billion rand is being allocated to it. Not sure whether it's only going to be just the provinces and the companies that were impacted, but if it is countrywide, is 5.3 billion rand enough, even when we are looking at extending it for another 6 months? I think we have lost...
Unfortunately, we have great question there. I certainly hope we have an opportunity to... Unfortunately, we are going to have to leave it at that for this afternoon, Ms. Sibeko. Apologies for the break in transmission there. But certainly a really good question, Xolani, and let's discuss it and ventilate it as the afternoon progresses.